Hello, it's Karen Burniston here with my monthly designer challenge video. The theme this month is flowers, and the technique I am showing is how to use the mechanism from our Mailbox Pop-up die set to make a double spinner card. I took inspiration from a class card that I taught last weekend using this same technique with our crosshatch hearts and some little spinning monkeys. And then to make it match the theme, I swapped out and used our crosshatch labels instead, and then garden charms on the spinners. The first thing I needed to do was reverse the orientation of the watering can, because when it die cuts it points to the left, but I needed it to point to the right. So I took my silver metallic cardstock and put score tape on the back, and then I'm going to die cut from the score tape side. My cutting pad has tons of scratches in it, which will actually be perfect for adding some texture to the watering can, since the silver is going to be against all those scratches, and then with the score tape it's an even thicker sandwich. So it's really going to push that silver cardstock into those scratches and give it an interesting texture. I'm not using it as a charm, so I can cut off the charm hole at the top. And since it is a sticker and I don't want it to be a sticker, I am going to put that onto a black watering can that I've already cut. So the score tape was really about just getting some extra thickness to the sandwich so that when I pressed it through, the silver would really scuff up against that cutting pad. And then by adding it to the black one, it just adds a little bit more structure to it for the spinning element. I pounced some black Stays-On ink onto the silver using a paper towel to give it some extra texture, and then just used a black Copic marker to highlight the spout holes and then just brush around the edges. Then I layered 2 small silver flowers from our Tiny Trees pop-up, added an enamel dot in the center, and then glued that to the watering can. So that is my finished watering can, and now I'm ready to make the card. My cardstock is 10 inches by 5 inches, scored in the center for folding, and then I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper. Each of those are 4 5/8 by 4 1/2. And then to the bottom edge, I'm adding some other pieces of pattern paper that are also 4 5/8, but 1 1/4 inches tall. And then I'm going to use a distressing tool just to rough up the edges of my pattern paper to give it just more of a rustic look. And then I'll glue those papers inside my card. I'm using the flower border from our Long Nature Edges 2 die set and then just going through with a white pen and filling in all of the centers of the flowers before I pull it out of the die. And one wasn't enough to get all the way across the card, so I used a partial of a second one. There are 5 labels in the Labels Crosshatch die set. The one I have chosen is the one in the middle, which has the crosshatch pattern. And then from the Mailbox Pop-up die set, I've cut 2 of the mechanisms and 1 mailbox. Now the color of the mailbox doesn't matter because it's just being used as a template. So I line it up so it's even with the label on the left side. So it needs to be right at the edge of the label on the left. And then up and down doesn't really matter as much. I'm just going to use those little corners right there so I can keep it kind of straight. And then I'm just going to trace that hole that's in the mailbox onto my label. So like I said, the mailbox is just being used as a template to get the hole from the mailbox onto the label so that the mechanism will work with the label instead of the mailbox. And again, left-hand side has to be lined up evenly. And then it can go pretty much anywhere you want, up and down. I just chose that location. Okay, so now I just need to go in and cut that hole into the label using my scissors. And I'll poke a starter hole somewhere inside the traced mark, and then when I cut it out, I'm going to cut on the outside of the pencil line so that I get a hole that's at least as big or about similar in size to the one that's in the mailbox itself. This does not have to be pretty or even, it just really needs to be in there in the right location at about the right size so that the mechanism will work with the label instead of the mailbox. Now it is time to fold up the mechanisms. So the first thing I'm going to do is just sketch in with a pencil where the score lines are in the piece that the die has made. You certainly don't have to do that on your piece, but it does help on the video to make them more visible for people to see where they are. So I'm just going in and sketching those in, and then I've drawn a little line at the top to kind of show where the glue is going to go as well. Okay, first things first, I do not need the bottom spinner. We're only using the upper spinners on these mechanisms. So right here where that cut line ends, I'm just going to cut vertically and actually just remove and discard the bottom spinner completely. For folding, I like to do the 3 vertical folds first. That's what creates the pop-up box. And they will all be mountain folds, which means you're folding away from yourself. Even if maybe you start them folding towards yourself because it's easier, then just reverse them so that they do become mountain folds. So those 3 vertical folds are going to create the pop-up box for the card. You can see it there from the side view. Okay, and then to work the diagonal folds, I first fold the piece down on the vertical line that's between the 2 diagonal folds. Then I stick my thumbnail into the diagonal fold and I work that through both layers. Then I can push between the triangles and it will invert them so that as I close down the mechanism, those triangles fold into the piece. So that's just kind of a basic spinner mechanism, just those triangles folding into the piece. Then the spinner arm needs to fold at its base and come to the front. And I've put a little pencil line there to show that that's where the glue goes. So it glues down, but only in the area up to the diagonal fold. So just in that little triangle area, the spinner arm glues down. And then now as it closes, the spinner arm will move to horizontal. And then when it opens, it'll move to vertical. So that is the spinner right there. I had an idea to help me keep my mechanism straight on the back of these labels by just adding a horizontal line from like a corner to a corner on the back of the label where you're not going to see it. And then that way when I go and add my mechanism, I can kind of use that line to make sure that it looks like I'm orienting it straight. Okay, so back to my mechanism again. I've kind of folded under the tab, so now I'm just looking at the closed position. And I'm putting the adhesive everywhere. And then on the back of the label where I drew the line, I'm going to make sure the arm goes through the hole. And then out on the right side, since I'm upside down, it's on the right side, I'm going to make sure that the fold line in the mechanism is right at the edge of the label. And then I can also look right here and just see if the top edge of the mechanism looks like it's straight in relation to that line that I drew. And then back to the front, you can see how that's going to work. As the card opens, then the arm will come through the hole and rotate into a vertical position. Okay, on the left-hand side, I can see that there's a little bit of my mechanism showing above the contour of my label. So I'm just going to go with my scissors and trim that out. I don't need it. Okay, and now this one is done. It is ready to go in the card, and I just need to repeat that same process to do the other spinner. Okay, time to repeat that process with the second spinner. So I do not need the bottom spinner at all. I'll cut that away, and then I'm going to work the 3 vertical folds that create the pop-up box. Then I fold between the 2 triangles so that I can work those diagonal folds in both directions. Then I open it, invert the triangle so that they fold into the piece. The spinner arm comes over the top, and then some glue just in the triangle area to tack it down. And now when the triangles fold in, the spinner arm will stick out to the right. Okay, this is the flat position, so I'm going to add my adhesive in those flat areas and then turn that mechanism over. And on the back of my other label, once again, I am lining up that fold line on the right, so it's right at the edge of the label. I'm looking at the horizontal line to see if it's straight, and then I can just check that everything's working. If I attach these labels to each other and I can stagger them like this, then I technically only need the upper left tab. I don't need the left tab on the bottom one because it's not even going to reach the fold. So for the bottom label only, I can take my scissors and actually remove the left tab and any portion of the mechanism that was visible. And I still need the right tab and the arm and all that, but now what I'm going to do is attach those labels to each other, and then basically they're going to share the left tab, if that makes sense. So looking at the back, the important thing is that I just make sure that everything stays straight. And I find that that's pretty easy to do by eye, especially because I drew those lines on the labels that are horizontal. So if I just add my adhesive and then go in there and kind of just looking at those horizontal lines and just looking at where the tabs are and just making sure that everything looks really straight. Okay, and then I turn that back around to the front side again, and it is ready to install inside the card. So adding adhesive to that left tab, and I do like glue for this. I'm using my LINECO neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle, and we do sell both of those items on our website. So I want the end of that tab to be right into the fold of the card. I like to lift up the left side so that I can make sure I'm right up jammed up next to the fold. And then I look vertically and I make sure that I've centered my label set. And then I carefully close the left side of the card against that exposed adhesive. And then when I open the card, you'll see that it has attached it now to the left side of the card right here. And then keeping everything on that left side of the card, I'm going to add adhesive to the 2 tapered tabs. So this is the flat position. On the 2 tapered tabs, adding some adhesive. Then I just keep everything nice and flat and close the right side of the card against that exposed adhesive. And then I have to be a little patient because when I open it, it's going to want to pull those tabs up rather than work the spinners. So I like to just reach in there with my finger and hold those 2 small tabs down the first time I open the card, just to really make sure that they are attached. You can even open the card all the way up and give them a press in the open position as well. And there you see it. I've got 2 mechanism spinners coming through those labels. You can see how generic this technique is. Really anything could be added to those spinners. But when you do add items, just make sure that you're only putting your adhesive out on the very end of the spinner arm, because a fair bit of that arm actually dives behind the label in the closed position. So the spot for adhesive is just out on the end. I decided to use a mini glue dot, mainly just because it'll sort of immediately let me start, looking at it spinning versus waiting for the glue to dry. But glue would work just as well. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to be a strong adhesive. And then I've placed it in the open position so that it's up. And then as it closes, it'll turn it to horizontal. And then I put my adhesive on the upper spinner arm. And since my card is open, I want to place my watering can so that it is in the watering position, like it is dumping water onto the flowers. And then just check it and see if it spins out of the way and also keeps within the card. So those are your only 2 things, is making sure they're not crashing into each other or catching on something in the card, that you like the angle and the motion, and that they don't stick out of the card in the closed position. So let's say I wanted to elevate that watering can a little bit away from the label. Maybe that helps it spin and not creak as much, or maybe it was catching against something. Then I can use a pop dot on the back of the watering can, but not remove the liner from the other side. So in other words, I want it stuck to the watering can, but not stuck to the label, because it still has to be able to spin. And then now it'll kind of just, elevate on that pop dot and be a little bit away from the label. I really do just design these as I'm making the video, and I decided that maybe 1 pot of flowers was cool, but what about 2 pots of flowers? So I just added a second one attached to the first one so that I would have more tulips being watered. The Garden Charms also includes a couple different garden tools. So I've put the rake on my spinning pots and just managed to barely keep that in the card. Okay, on the left side of the card, I'm going to add a label set. That's from the Crosshatch labels. I've layered 2 together. And then right at the edge of the small one, I'm going to put a fold in that large label. Now I want to work that fold back and forth a few times because I would really like it to be a pretty loose fold. And where I'm going to place this label is on the left side of the card, but I want that fold line right at the edge of the pop-up so that that label can cover that little bit of mechanism that I can see surrounding the label. So once I figured out the position, I want to put the adhesive on the pop-up portion, since only a portion of the label is going to attach to it. And then I just press that down, and once that sets up, then I can add adhesive to the big part of the label and glue it to the left side of the card. I cut and embossed our script word hello out of silver cardstock. I'm not using the shadow on this one, just the word itself. And I just made sure that it is a thin place between the L's that crosses the fold and not any part of the letters themselves. And then that makes it pretty easy to span that fold. I added a couple of labels in the upper right corner to be able to write a personal greeting, and then another pot of tulips and my spade from the Garden Charms in the lower left corner. Okay, so this is essentially done, but then I had the idea that it would be cool to have some wire coming out of the watering can to look like water. So of course that probably would have been easier to do when I was building the water can, but since I had the idea I wanted to do it, I put score tape on the watering can when I die cut it so that it would be sticky on top, and then I could just stick my wires in to that adhesive, and then it would be sticky enough that I could just go in and attach it to the back of the spout. And then once I had them attached, I just had to finesse it a little bit, cut some of the length off, maybe had to adjust the angle a little bit to make sure that they would stay in the card in the closed position. And then just a few more small flowers sprinkled around the card's interior. Just a simple lead-in for the card front using my leftover materials, and then I did add a greeting using our word set 4. And you could experiment with this technique, change the card size, maybe do it in a slimline card or something, and maybe do 3 of them. You can really have fun with this idea of borrowing that mailbox mechanism to make a generic spinner card. What's nice about a 5x5 square card is that it still fits in an A7 envelope, so you can actually mail it in a rectangular envelope, and then you don't have the surcharge for mailing a square card. If you are watching this video on YouTube, I definitely invite you to check the description box below. That's where you will find a link to the blog post and supply links. You will also find on that blog post links to all the floral inspiration by our very talented design team for this month's challenge. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com, where you can purchase these dies as well as find links to our other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.